Welcome back to Face the Nation. The release of Brittany Griner from Russia is putting focus on other Americans held hostage abroad, including Emad Shargi, who has been detained in Iran since 2018. He was sentenced without trial to 10 years in prison. Joining me now is his wife, Margaret Shargi, and their two daughters, Ariana and Hannah. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here, Margaret.
I know it's never easy to talk about this, but it's important. There has been a lot that has happened since we last spoke inside Iran and with these hostages released. Bahrain, what was your reaction when you heard that Brittany Griner was released?
I was ecstatic for Brittany and her family. Brittany should have never been detained, and I was very, very happy that she's back home. And it also gives me hope because it means that this can be done for others, such as my husband and other Americans who are held in Iran.
So it's hopeful for you.
Yes, very much so.
Ariana, you know, when Brittany Griner was released, her agent issued a letter, and it stood out to me because they said they will try to help families like yours. In fact, they named Emad in the list of those who are wrongfully detained, held for being American. Also listed Murad Tabaz, Siamak Namazi, who has been detained 7 years now. He was left behind when the U.S. and Iran traded prisoners back in 2016. Do you find that all of you working together is making a difference?
I definitely think so. I mean, we are all a part of this terrible club that no one wants to be a part of. But it's been really incredible to have this family of hostage families of Americans held abroad. And I do think that us helping each other makes a huge difference to get the word out, but also for this amazing support system that we've developed. So I do really sincerely appreciate the fact that Brittany is going to advocate for other hostages held abroad. Anything we can all do together, I definitely think is more powerful than just one family advocating for their own loved one.
Hannah, I know when we all last spoke back in June, you were all publicly asking for a meeting with President Biden and with White House officials.
Yes.
Have you gotten one?
We have not received a meeting with him. We've been asking as a family, along with the other hostage families, to meet with him for quite some time, and I just don't understand why he isn't meeting with us. I think it would make a big difference to sit down with him. I want to tell him about my dad. I want to tell him how scared we are, how pressing this matter is, and how time-sensitive it really is. I mean, our father could have been killed in the Evin fire.
This is a fire at a prison where your father's being held back in October.
Yes, so there was a fire and the riots at the prison where he is being held. We didn't hear from him for 2 days. We didn't know if he was alive or not. He inhaled tear gas and smoke from the fires, and it just shows that this is a really pressing issue and there's really no time to wait. We don't know really what's going to happen day to day. So I just want to sit down with the president and tell him our story and ask that he does everything he can to bring our dad home. I mean, we live in Washington, D.C. We'll come anytime he has available for us.
Did you receive any response from the White House to your public calls?
We did. We wrote as the families, Iranian families, the Iranian-American families, to the president, and we did get an acknowledgement of the letter, but that was it. I have seen no signs. It's just been talk, but nothing really to show us that he's doing anything, or his administration really, to bring Emad and the other Americans home.
You know, Ariana, with the prisoners in Iran, this is a really tough situation. The U.S. nuclear talks with Iran appear to be crumbling. You have Iran now helping Russia in Ukraine. For the White House, does it raise a risk by meeting with you? Do you think there's a good reason for them not to meet with you? Or do you feel like you're being treated differently?
Frankly, I don't think there's a good reason not to meet with us. I mean, we're Americans, first and foremost, before even just being a hostage family. But also, if Biden and his administration could have the the courage and the fortitude to get Brittany out of Russia while Russia is in a war with Ukraine, then I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to get my dad out of Iran. It's clear that they have the skills and the tools to make these difficult negotiations and to make the hard but correct decisions.
Secretary Blinken and the State Department has to handle a lot of these issues. Have you been in communication with them? Are they more forthcoming?
The State Department has been great. We talk to them often, and I know they have done a lot to bring our father home, but at the end of the day, I think what we really need is the White House to be more involved. That is really where the decision is going to come from at the end of the day. The president has the authority to make these kinds of big decisions, and that's really who we need to speak with now.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I've asked Secretary Blinken in the past, he says these issues are so important to him. He carries a card in his pocket with the names of the hostages. But as he likes to say, the other side gets a vote. Do you get the sense that there is a deal to be made and that there's a choice not to take it? I mean, do you have any sense of where the diplomacy is or any progress with Emad?
I mean, we have always asked and hoped that the issue of the JCPOA and our father's release are separate.
The nuclear deal.
The nuclear deal, yes. But as of now, we have seen no plan to bring our father home. That's what I'd really like to see someone say, this is the plan, we are going to execute it. But it seems that at the moment there is no clear and concise plan to actually bring my dad and the rest of the Americans home from Iran.
Hannah, you tweeted the other day a pretty powerful tweet because the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was asked by a reporter about your dad on the day Brittany Griner was released. And she said she wasn't familiar with the case. You said it was crushing, absolutely crushing to hear that.
Yes, it was definitely hard to hear that she did not know my father's name. She was not familiar with the case and deferred us to the State Department. Once again, she was asked the same question in June and also said that she was not familiar with his name or the case. And I just don't understand how I should have faith that my dad's going to be home if the White House doesn't even know his name.
You know, diplomats I talked to say they are working on this. It is just a very, very difficult situation. But you just want your husband home. How is Emad? How is he doing? What do you know about his state?
Emad is not well. We are not well. Emad is thousands of miles away from us. He's an innocent American being held hostage for no good reason at all. Again, like Hannah said, and we don't hear of any particular plan of how he will be brought home. Again, with everything going on, with the fire, with the protests, Emad is at risk every single day, every single moment. They all are, the hostages in Iran. And we just don't know why the administration doesn't use all the tools they have and the president to just encourage the administration to do what is the right thing. We are behind him. I hope that we ask all the American people to be behind the president to help support bring Emad and the other Americans home.
As for you, this is not at all political.
No.
You just want your dad back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a humanitarian
issue at the end of the day. It's not a political issue. These are Americans and they just deserve to be home with their families. So it's not political really. It's about people at the end of the day.
I mean, we're coming up on the 4th or 5th holiday season without him?
Fifth.
Yes. And it is on the way here, actually, I was telling the girls, wouldn't it be fun to go get a Christmas tree this weekend or today or something? And it just wouldn't be fun. And we have not gotten it. And we are waiting for Emad to come. And it happens that, in fact, December 24th is also our anniversary, and yet another anniversary to be spent where Emad is in jail and I am here. So we just want Emad back home.
Well, we wish you the best of luck with that, and we will keep following your story. Thank you so much. for talking about your dad and your husband.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Before we get to our next segment, a quick follow-up. We asked the White House for a response to the Shargi family, and a spokesperson said that they have offered a meeting with the president's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, and they're working on scheduling it. Turning now to national security, we want to welcome our panel of experts. Former National Security Council Russia Specialist Fiona Hill and Chris Krebs, former Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency head and a CBS News analyst. They both worked together during the Trump administration. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning.
Fiona, there's so much to get to, but I want to ask about this prisoner swap. Your former colleague, John Bolton, I think your former boss, right, on the National Security Council, told one of my colleagues at CBS that the possibility of a boot for Whalen trade existed back then, and it wasn't made for very good reasons, having to deal with Victor Bout. Do you recall a potential prisoner swap with Russia?
Yes, I do recall that. That was raised many times by the Russians, that they wanted Victor Bout. And at the time, there was also the drug smuggler, Yaroshenko, who was ultimately swapped for Trevor Reed, the other former Marine. They were put on the table by the Russians, making it very clear that they had every intent of trying to swap Americans that had been wrongfully detained for individuals in United States custody who were there for pretty good reasons.
Do you see something particularly dangerous about Victor Bout? I mean, why was that swap turned down then, but it happened just this past week?
Well, look, at the particular time, I also have to say here that President Trump wasn't especially interested in engaging in that swap for also Paul Whelan. He was not particularly interested in Paul's case in the way that one would have thought he would be. Ambassador Bolton met with Elizabeth Whelan, Paul's sister. I was at that meeting as well. There was a lot of attention being paid to this and trying to find ways of arranging Paul's release by all different parts of the US government. But of course, there was a big debate about Victor Bout himself. I mean, as we see now as well, the absurdity of the Russians asking for the release of a notorious arms dealer, as well as somebody who'd been convicted of large-scale narcotics smuggling, in return for American citizens who had been either set up, in the case of Paul Whelan, and later imprisoned in the case of Trevor Reed and Brittany Griner for very minor infractions that would have been handled differently in different cases. It was clear that the Russians were looking to kind of set the United States up as well for just the kind of things that we're seeing now in terms of the roiling of our domestic politics, as Chairman Schiff talked about later. Right. I mean, this is all part of a political game for the Russian government. And
that's what you have been talking about, Chris, that the spin around this that has really electrified the political body in this country.
Well, Putin's very much tapped into the culture wars here. He understands the various levers and divisions that exist in American society. And, given the fact that Russia does not have a whole lot going on, their military clearly is underperforming on the field in Ukraine. Economically, they are a bit of a, has been. This is one of the few areas that Putin still has influence and ability to shape the global narratives. And so this is one of those things where I think Americans traveling and as abroad, as soon as you leave the United States, you have to be very mindful of how you may fit into these information battles back and forth.
But it has become an attack point from Republicans, including the House Republican leader, that this swap took place for a Marine veteran left behind. But Fiona, you're making the point that that Marine veteran was left behind. He was captured during the Trump administration. So you're arguing this is just disingenuous outcry, essentially.
Look, what we have to bear in mind, as in the previous segment brought to the fore, is we have a lot of American citizens who are being taken by other countries for political purposes.
President Biden called it a national emergency.
That's absolutely right. And as Chris is saying, every single American citizen who travels abroad, even, look, in allied and partner countries, if you get into trouble, there's only so much that the United States government can do for you. And when it is a state like Russia or Iran or China or North Korea, I mean, some of them are more obvious than others, you are putting yourself at a certain degree of risk, even if you think you are just basically going either for tourist purposes or to visit family or for something routine. Remember, Trevor Reed was going to visit his girlfriend. Paul Whelan was going to a wedding. And Brittany Griner was doing something that many other athletes do around the world, including Russian athletes here in the United States. If we think of Ovechkin, for example, playing one of the greatest hockey players here in the United States, playing for a Washington-based team. They were doing something that seemed routine, seemed completely ordinary, but found themselves snarled up in basically political games. And we have to be mindful of the fact that when governments do this, they're doing it for trading purposes, but they're also doing it to mess about in our politics. And we are falling every single time for this. The more that we fight with each other, the more that we play into their hands. And we also risk other Americans being taken because it's a way of influencing our domestic politics.
It's interesting you connect all those dots there. I know, Chris, you have been watching just the conversation we have with ourselves on social media and how inflamed it is. When it comes to some of these more extreme groups, it's almost sometimes, it sounds so absurd, and yet there are national security risks, as we saw in Germany this week, with this extraordinary arrest, an attempted coup in Germany by people linked to QAnon. Right. I mean, it doesn't sound real, but it is.
Well, the QAnon piece, I think it's a reminder or confirmation that QAnon is a global phenomenon that is catching on. And actually, I think in part what we're seeing now is that it's broadening and it's almost becoming mainstream. We have this attempted coup in Germany. We have January 6th and the efforts to overturn the January 2020 or the 2020 election that was Q adjacent as well. These things are catching on and they're informing much more radical behaviors, both at a national level and as a local level. And I think in part, some of the things that we're seeing with the attacks on the electrical grid, for instance, may not be Q, but they are extremists. They are online. They're white supremacist groups that are pulling down and developing playbooks. Right. And so there are national level efforts, but there are also local level efforts. And a lot of this is just due to the broader information ecosystem and how virulent these conspiracy theories and efforts to, overcome normal civil society.
The Homeland Security Secretary said that it did appear in North Carolina that attack was deliberate, but it's early. Are you saying you believe there is evidence that it is tied to organized domestic extremists?
So that, I think, is still a large question mark, and the investigators are taking a look at. But the attack itself on that facility, that substation in Moore County, was unquestionably deliberate. The tactics that the attackers used, multiple, two different substations, and then going in and targeting very specific critical equipment in that site, there's no question that it was premeditated, that it was coordinated, it was deliberate. Combine that with the fact that there were half a dozen similar sorts of events in the Pacific Northwest. There have been events throughout the Southeast. So it says to me that there is something broader going on here, and perhaps we are paying more attention now. But there is a significant threat to our nation's critical infrastructure. And right now, both the utility operators as well as law enforcement, I think, are doing a hard look at what needs to change and how do we counter this threat.
Fiona, when you were with us in October 2021, you said something that stuck in my brain ever since, where you talked about the election cycles of 2022 and 2024 being potential vehicles for potential violence. And you called January 6th a dress rehearsal. Are you as concerned now as you were then about the stability of the country?
I'm, let's just say, a bit more cautiously optimistic than I was back then. I mean, I think all alarms and red lights were flashing on every front for all of us at that particular juncture. We've actually seen much more careful handling on every front of recent elections, including the midterms, people being more circumspect about what's happening. Of course, we've got the committee. We just had Chairman Schiff on the programme, and the work that they're doing, which is, I think, played a very important role for a lot of Americans in sort of seeing how everything unfolded and people waking up to the risks of just so much acrimony in our politics. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we're out of the woods, and actually, as Chris is saying, we've got an awful lot of groups who've been fired up by all of this, and they also take inspiration from international events. Right. And so it isn't a coincidence, as we've been talking about, that you've had this coup attempt in Germany, and there are linkages among all of these events, because there are certain groups that flow backwards and forwards, and they link on the internet, and they have personal direct connections. And so we are still in a dangerous time where we need to be vigilant and thinking about our resilience.
Thank you for connecting all those dots for both of you, for us. We'll be back in a moment. Jamie Dimon was in West Baltimore last week to mark the opening of Chase Bank's latest community branch, part of a $30 billion program that helps underserved communities improve banking access, financial education, and economic mobility. We asked him about the community banking program and the gaps that JPMorgan Chase hopes to address. So in coming in here, JPMorgan has to change some of the parameters because you're reaching people who are unbanked.
Yes.
How do you know if someone is creditworthy if they've never owned a home, they've never had a bank account?
When you're here and you ask and you know the neighborhoods and you work with government, you do multiple things. You can use other facts that are not used in traditional underwriting. Like, have you paid rent for 10 years? So you and I would both say if there is a mother or father or family paying rent for 10 years, that's a good credit sign. So we take a little bit of a stretch on that. The government here came up with a very special program to put in the seed money to rehab the whole block. Once they rehab the whole block, we can step in and start making mortgages so people can buy the homes and live there. Mm-hmm. And so there are multiple paths to do it. On the Entrepreneur of Color Fund that we do with small businesses, we give them an advisor too. That gives us great comfort that they're doing the right things.
In this moment we're in right now, you have mortgage rates, about 7%?
6.5%, yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to get access, but the Fed's also trying to cool off a housing market bubble.
We look right through that, and we will look past the actual rates. And remember, the important thing about mortgages, and this is why I do criticize some public policy sometimes, mortgages are how most Americans got their net worth.
Right.
And if you can't get a smaller mortgage to buy a house, it's hard to build your net worth. Mortgages are also, by the way, how often people funded their small business startup. So it is absolutely critical. And one of the things that we've been trying to change a little bit is because of all excessive rules now, and I'm not talking about things that would make risk worse, about origination, servicing, securitization, the cost of a small mortgage is probably 50 basis points higher than it should be. So that $150,000 mortgage or $200,000 mortgage is less affordable by a lot of people. And that's because of regulatory policy. That's not because of bank policy.
The critic would say a big bad Wall Street bank is loading debt onto poor people. How do you respond to that?
We're not trying to load debt on anyone. We want to make good mortgages. We want to do good small business loans. We want to educate people on how to open an account, how to save money. We've got products that are special for lower income communities and stuff like that. We are going to do that. It is good for this community.
We'll be right back.